Hello everyone, Kurt over here, and welcome back to another episode of Fiore Labs. Today we continue on with Fiore's axe section, but before we get into any of the plays of the axe, we're going to be talking about how the usage of the sword and armor conveys across into the axe section. Now, one thing about this right here is, and we're going to get to this in later videos, is that essentially the concept of half swording and everything else that comes out of the armored sword section is not something that is just universally limited to the sword. The sword is very good at being able to do those things because of the sharp edges and striking areas on its surface that allow for certain things to come into existence. The axe possesses these things as well, and it's one of those things where, if you use the axe at crossings, you can find the same things, although just be a little bit differently, in being able to find like pommel and hooking and everything else, as also thrusting, depending on what you have on the butt end, is available to you do with the sword. And we're going to be looking at this in this video. But before we do, please don't forget, like, subscribe, share with a friend out there, and if you're new to the channel, please join us and welcome, because we'd love to have you on this journey of Fiore's Armitsari. Want to grow this channel, and it's not possible without viewers like you, or the dedicated people that watch this every week here and have subscribed already. So thank you so much for coming by. With that being the case, let's get into how the sword and armor conveys lessons that carry across into the axe section.
Okay, so this week, like I said before in the introduction, we're having swords in our hand here because ultimately I want to go through just like the basic concepts of crossings that we saw earlier within the sword section within armor. And we're going to talk about how essentially everything we learned there applies to every weapon at close quarters. The axe is one of those things that once you miss your shot, it really does devolve really quickly into half-on-half crossings where people look to strike and cause other areas. So just to review a little bit about this right here, and all we're going to do is we're not going to go through the full play from starting off in Vera Croce and an extended sword position. We're just going to form up here in a crossing where we have made this type of thing, where we've crossed on this, just to review the areas in which we may have actions to leverage in. And the ones we're talking about here is how we can shift across here. I can stab to the elbow, or I can turn to the arm, or I can leverage into a lower lock. How I can come right here, maybe he pushes his tip against me, and I leverage the pommel against him, or in this case right here, coming up beneath here to strike at that point. So all these crossing points right there that have come with the sword in general are all the same type of applicability. If you remember also, and we'll see this here in later portions, how if I stab into the person's arm, that might cause pain, which allows me access to inner portion. If you swap sides, in a general concept right here, go put this like this. The whole concept coming over here, and as I drive this in, from this point, maybe I don't stick him and he decides to turn back at me. Breaking down the hands here to get into the spot, into lower lock positions, into the body. All these types of plays right here we're going to see again, which is, I think, just Fiore's commentary about how we can use this. So this video right here, we're just talking about the basic understanding about how, again, everything we've learned within the sword is possible to be utilized with the axe. And we're going to look at those because there are some slight variances and changes with that, but there's not much as far as, but ultimately it has more to do about the length of the weapon and not about what the technique is of itself. So the big thing that happens with this right here is, and again, I want to talk about, essentially every axe play when it comes out to the positioning of what we've talked about before, people crossing in different areas, and this ways in which we create the same type of crossing mechanisms as the sword and with the axe. Ultimately here, as we saw within all the posta, a basic striking mechanism. So Aaron might take a shot in at me from above, and I might utilize this kind of crossing here to be able to take action against him. If that looks very familiar to you, good, because the reality is that is the same type of thing when we talk about, using Vera Croce with the spada, but now we're just utilizing the axe. And that's just using, in Breve Serpentina, he throws in at me out here, coming up into this, and now I come into a crossing area where I can once again find areas where I can find the arms, or maybe he sees me going for his arms, he pushes away, and I have a strike right here to his face with the poleaxe. The poleaxe itself in those types of crossings means we have different areas in which we may shift around. And right now, essentially, I'm utilizing one that I think is actually quite iconic to what Fiore has within his Mesoporte di Fiore. This one's not much larger, but it's still, but it is a little bit different as far as length goes. So length of this does play a key factor, but at the same time too, it just means you leverage in different points and spots. So for example, right here, if I crack in his, and he's just going to come up and meet me in the middle of the shaft, I'm going to come from above. So in this case right here, he may not be able to stab the elbow because this portion right here is a little bit longer, right? But that doesn't mean that he can't sweep across to the throat and now he throw me over my leg, over his leg, whatever the case may be. It also might mean that as I crack it right here, maybe as he pushes at me here, maybe in this spot I turn to his hands, maybe his axe head is a little bit further away from my head. It doesn't mean that this is not going to suck for me, but it just means that he might also be able to utilize the elements of this weapon head to throw me in different directions. So crossing up with this right here, boom, I stop him here. Maybe he sweeps this around, he can strike this in, or maybe he pulls it over top of my head here and then pulls back down through, which allows me to get turned into a throw or other type of manipulation. So again, it doesn't matter the length of it, it just matters where you are at the crossing of it. Okay? A couple other options right here that we've talked about before is, again, this by keeping my hands connected to a weapon, we know that there's going to be some type of inside action of play. So for example, right here, maybe he chokes up towards the base, right? And as he strikes up at me right here, well, now he's got the ability to get that portion, the spike end of the dagger inside of my arm because he's got that leverage. And with a turn, he's leveraging straight down into the body. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have, that there's anything specific about the axe right here with the crossings that comes onto the sword. You have the same kind of shapes and considerations that make a different kind of plays in this. Thrusting wise with this, the applications right here, as far as like where he can hit me at within the armored sword sections. Again, if he's in a postally dominant positioning and I have that breve serpentina, we know we have a low shot, we know we have a high shot. Any spot on him that is unarmored is available to me. So at this point, if I thrust at him and he crosses at me, well, now we are once again into that half-swording concept, which allows me to find areas inside of his body to cause weaknesses on. Okay? So the point being right there is no matter what you have as far as action, you have ways to get in on here because the leveraging lessons that you did already within the sword section still apply to this weapon system. And that's what we're going to be talking about here is the beginning portion, because from this point on, every play out of here is really just going to be specific things that I believe actually become more of the theory of operation that Fiore is trying to say to us in order to trap this weapon system out of play, is also how to work with it yourself, because everything before is your close order kind of concepts. But the reality is when you give a hammer to somebody, every problem becomes a nail, and they're probably going to try to utilize this as the max capacity, and that's what this play that's what the whole section of this manuscript right here is really about. But more about that in future weeks to come.
So as you can see with the video, one thing about Fiore's manuscript that, a lot of people talk about holistic and whatnot, and, that is, in my opinion, is absolutely accurate, 100% true. You apply things across disciplines, what we call sequences, that allow for the totality of the art, which is already learned in abbracciare, to carry forth into all other aspects within the manuscript. Now, a big part of this right here is that the sword, as I've said before in other sections, is a great teacher. By learning as one of the 6 dissimilar guards, you get the different balances and feelings of how things carry across and how they shift in different types of directions. So by using this sword in the fashion of being able to hook and find things, as you saw within this video, you can find the same type of striking actions and angles that already apply from sword in 2 hands to armored sword and beyond because of its usage. The axe section itself for Fiore's manuscript is incredibly limited when you look at other traditions when it comes down to the axe. For example, we have, other traditions that will go very, very, very deep into the usage of like half-axing and so on and so forth. such as like Jude la Hache, please forgive my, or Jacques la Hache, Jack the Axe, where you see a French knight fighting a system in style, which I actually don't think is just a French knight style. I think it's actually incorporating a lot of what Fiore says with half sorting at crossings and how you can find the things, which you already saw within the earlier sections of the manual. But he doesn't put this right here within the axe section because I think in many ways, as we'll see in future videos, the axe is, what happens if every problem's a nail and you're given a hammer? Well, you treat it like a hammer. So this right here, in my opinion, is just the same types of crossings that you can get out of the sword sections, but with the axe, and apply them to be able to utilize against somebody who's in armor. In the videos to come, we're going to be looking at specific things that once again focus on the axe and that are very unique and dangerous to why its usage is so effective. And we'll be talking about that here all together in times to come. But with that being the case here, please, like I said, leave a comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. How much do you practice different styles of axes and of axe traditions out there? Do you utilize Fiore's armored sword section to teach across into the axis section that you have here? What are your thoughts and feelings on the matter of this? And again, please let me know if you've ever done any type of armor fighting here, whatever the case. And again, love to have you along for this journey of the martial traditions of Fiore. And until next time, everybody, as always, please be safe out there, train well, fight on. I'll see you all soon.